Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host today, and I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. Today's topic is going to be the changing demographics of chocolate buyers. And what I'd like to do is remind everyone who's watching today that no matter where you are, whether on LinkedIn or YouTube and Facebook, go into the comments. Let me know where you're watching this from, especially if you're watching live. If you are watching live, what I'll do is I'll get it up on stage, the shout out up on stage, and I'll shout out back. But otherwise, I like to know where in the world people are connecting in from. Helps me understand what my audience is, and I like to know that just where people are tuning in from. Makes me feel good to know what that is. And of course, if you have questions about anything that I'm going to be talking about today, you can throw it into the comments. I'll get the question up on screen and do my best to answer it during the course of the live stream. If not, what I will do is I will go and answer it and put it in the post on the Chocolate Life, which is a good segue into talking about the post that I create for every single one of these live streams. And so this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there and you can click around, and here is the post that I created for today's live stream. So it's the changing demographics of chocolate, and you can go here and you can see the post. And so if you scroll down, what you'll do is you'll see that there's a bunch of links to resources. I'm going to be presenting from these resources during the course of the live stream. If there are other resources that are discussed, I will put them onto this page and you'll be able to get at them after the fact. That way you don't have to worry about capturing URLs, and you don't have to worry about, it's a little bit difficult for me to read. I know that it's difficult for everyone to read. Which brings me to another point, which is you may notice that my image on the screen is a little bigger than it normally has been. And that's because the folks at StreamYard, the software that I'm using, have given us a layout editor. And now what I've been able to do is change the size and location of my image on this screen around what the Chocolate Life website looks like. And so I'm not obscuring the Chocolate Life page as much. And it enables me to actually show more of what's on the page. So just wanted to let people know about that before we move forward into today's topic of the changing demographics of chocolate buyers. So number one, why is this important? Why this topic today? And the answer is very, very simple, which is a Chocolate Life member reached out to me and said they're in the middle of doing a business plan. Did I have any resources on that I might know about the demographics of chocolate buyers that he might be able to use to help construct his business plan? And the answer is, I don't keep these things in my back pocket, but it was an interesting question. So what I decided to do was go out there and do a little quick bit of research on what that might look like, what the research into the demographics might look like, and share it with it. And so, I will share you a place that I started. It's going to be, let me get it. So I use a search engine called Neva instead of Google search. And one of the reasons why I use the Neva search engine is they've incorporated a language model. So, ChatGPT is part of their search. And so not in this particular page, but there are other pages where they generate AI interpreted responses to my questions. And then what they'll often do is provide links to they provide links to the sources that were used to generate the AI summaries. So it's a summarization tool. And I find that very, very interesting to have not just links to websites, and I have to go determine one by one whether or not these websites hold information that is interesting to me. But what I can do is I can look at the summary, look for the sources of the summary, and then I can I can evaluate whether or not those sources are ones that are of interest to me. And that's really, really important. Number one, when we think about the demographics or when we're looking at market research in general. So let's go take a look, for example, at this particular bit of research. So here is it's an industry trade magazine called Confectionery News. I've met one of their reporters. He's been at a couple of the launches that I've been at in the past. But this comes up as one of the research reports about changing demographics. And Confectionery News is a trade publication. There's no reason why I shouldn't trust it. But look very, very carefully, and what you'll do is you'll find that this report is authored by Cargill. And so it's going to be Cargill's research, which I don't have any reason to believe that Cargill's research is any better or worse than anybody else's research. But the results are going to be filtered from the point of view of Cargill, right? And so that may or may not be a bad thing. It's just really, really important to know as you go and look at this research if there might be influences from a particular company that has a vested interest in promoting a particular point of view. Now, I haven't downloaded this one yet, but you could. I haven't put a link to this yet onto the page, but what are the top growth segments according to Cargill in confectionery in 2020 through 2026? What are people thinking, consumers thinking about alternative sweeteners? And this is the point for Cargill providing you with this information, is they're trying to sell you their strategies for sugar reduction. So they have particular products and they have particular approaches, and all this information is to get you to buy Cargill products. Again, not bad on its face, but what you need to know is that this is what this information is being presented to you for. Right? So another category of research you might get to is a market research report. And so this is a company called Business Wire. They're owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and people may know Berkshire Hathaway because Warren Buffett founded Berkshire Hathaway a long time ago. What people may not know is that Berkshire Hathaway is also the owner of See's Candies. So there is a connection between Business Wire and See's Candies. I don't think it has anything to do with this bit of research. But what it is that they've done is they're reporting about a market research report having to do with the effect of COVID-19 on the sales, demographics, packaging, and what are called consumer psychographics. And this is from a company called researchandmarkets.com. And this report, if you were to go to the Research and Markets website, is probably going to cost you $5,000. And so most of us aren't going to spend $5,000 to get the research. But often one of the reasons to go and look at these things is that there will be some interesting information that's presented in these reports about the reports. Right? Now, so what we can do is this executive summary, right? I'm going to go here. Talks about the occasions for eating chocolate. I mean, if you are a chocolate maker, knowing if there are special occasions could help you plan your seasonal production. Very, very good. It's going to talk about what consumers are looking for when they're buying chocolate, key demographics, right? Right. So that's what is going to be in the executive summary. But here, when it comes to looking at, the effects of COVID-19 on consumers, we'll see that consumers who report eating chocolate frequently or more often are experiencing more negative effects from the COVID pandemic in one form or another. People are finding that their eating habits are changing. Consumers using chocolate more for snacking and baking, as well as for cooking during the pandemic. It would be interesting a year from now or 2 years from now to find out if this is still the case, so the follow-up research. But here we go, overview and market trends. So this is where you don't necessarily need to spend $5,000 on this research. So dietary concerns, gluten, food allergies, and dietary restrictions are concerned. We know that. Vegetarians, vegans, flexitarians are increasingly, their concerns are becoming increasingly important. We can also go take a look at a bunch of things that we might help us understand what we're looking for. So what we're looking for in terms of what our consumers are doing and looking for, so that we can talk about our packaging and talk about our products and talk about our business in particular ways. So chocolate makers are working towards improving their supply chains. They're looking for sustainable farming techniques, fair trade or more ethical, fair trade and ethical are not necessarily the same thing. But one of the things we've talked about this is sustainability is important to many consumers. And so understanding how we want to communicate around sustainability, which we've talked about here on The Chocolate Life, is a really, really important thing. But here's something that, is interesting. 1/4 of consumers are seeking health benefits from the food that they eat, right? And so if I'm looking at this, what I'm saying is, ooh, right? This is, talking about the health benefits at some point are going to influence a purchase decision, right? More than half of consumers say healthfulness matters more to them, right? Labels influence them. Half of consumers say whether a food is processed. Well, obviously, chocolate is a processed food, but it doesn't have to be a hyper-processed food. Sort of minimally processing could be language there. So even if I'm not going to spend, thousands of dollars on this research report, there's some high-level understanding. And this is more about what we call psychographics. So psychographics being what the consumers are thinking about, where demographics are talking about age, household income, where they live in the United States, and other things like that. And so demographics and psychographics go together. And so a trend that might be, for example, if you are in Kansas City, and say hi to Mike from Kansas City. So if you're in Kansas City, a trend that is really popular in New England that doesn't show up where you are in Kansas City, or you're living in a very rich suburb, like Westchester County or parts of Westchester County outside of New York, the household income is going to have an influence on the way you price your products. And so psychographics is telling you more about what your customers are thinking about, and then the demographics are going to give you a deeper dive into where your customers are, and more importantly, what they're willing to pay for what you're doing. And there are, if I'm a big company involved in distribution, I'm going to may want to purchase this report, having to do with specific statistics with respect to market performance. So having to do with what are in fact chocolate retail sales, what box chocolate brands work. So, in terms of understanding where you are with respect to your competitors in any particular place. So it also says retail and marketing trends and opportunity. So indulgence versus health and better for you, clean label trends, unrefined sugar, other diets, particular holidays, whether or not you want to target something like the LGBTQ community, which is a growing demographic. These are all things that you can go, oh, how do these trends fit into what it is that I think about my product, all right, and what it is, and my company, and what it is that I'm doing. And so there's a lot of stuff here, right? So LGBT consumers are the most likely demographic to buy chocolate. Those living in the Midwest region are most likely to buy chocolate. Chocolate purchases are high among all racial and ethnic groups. Good to know, right? Differences in chocolate purchase based on educational attainment. Also a good thing to know. So all of this information you just get from reading this post about the research report. You're lacking the numbers behind these things, but you can get to a lot of really, really important information about the market research report you're looking at. And this is really, really important. All right, I'm looking at Business Wire talking about this, right? And I would be careful about responding to an email address from what we in the industry might call a research mill. So there are companies, many of them are based in India, and they're just pumping out very, very large quantities of these research reports in which they're not doing much, if any, original research. So they're just looking at research which is done by other people and aggregating it, what they're called meta research. And so they're aggregating research from a bunch of other places and then putting some conclusions on top of it. So I would be very, very careful about responding to a research report. Many of them I find in my LinkedIn feed. Somebody is talking about something and you'll say, well, in order to get this information, you need to buy this research report. I would be careful and look into the bona fides of the company that's doing this right? Before you spend any money on it, whether or not the company has got a good reputation for the kind of research that it produces. So really, really important to know about that. And again, you want to know if a particular report is sponsored by a brand. So with that, let's go jump really quickly into the post. And one of the things that you'll see that I did, this is the post for today's live stream. You'll see that I posted some research from 2012. I posted some research from 2019, some research from 2020, and some research from 2021 and 2022, because this is about the changing demographics, right? So part of my challenge was to be able to go and find out how the demographics have changed. And oh, by the way, the link to the market research report, the link to the market research report that I was just showing you, the United States chocolate market, that link is this one here. So you can go and read. You didn't have to try to capture everything that I was saying during as I was showing you the page. So buying package market research, number one, avoid research mills. So if understand how you're receiving the information that you're getting and from where you're receiving the information is an important aspect of what you need to do. So let's go take a look at, this is the research from 2012. And one of the challenges for me in looking at this is there's nothing about this page that tells you that this was done in 2012. Right. So if I were to just go do a search on this and look at it, I wouldn't necessarily know when this information was published. So I need to go and be very careful about understanding what the calendar data is. I wouldn't want to be making my business planning decisions for 2022 based on information that was published in 2012. That's the important thing here. So one of the things let me go back. So one of the things that is most important here is that in 2012, what this research says, right, is that adults 45 and older, right, have higher per capita consumption, and which has trended up in the last 5 years, right? So this is what older millennials, young boomers, I suppose, might be the category there, right? Whereas during the same period, so this is from 2007 to 2012, consumption was trending up, whereas in the 18 to 44 age range, consumption was trending down, right? And so what you might do, right, and there's a little data, right, that's down here, includes leveraging chocolate's health halo, right? So there's some supporting information in here, which is really important. But if again, this is 2012, right? And if you're using that data today, it would be suspect. You wouldn't want to rely on 12-year-old data. So this is here, understand that this is a baseline. You know, this is where we were a decade ago. And it will, by helping understand the longer term trends, right, we can perhaps come to a decision as to whether any trends which seem to be hot right now, whether or not they have legs. Are they fads or are they really, really early trends? So this is a really, really fun piece of information for that, knowing that it's from 2012. So really, really important. So, and this was done by the NCA, the National Confectioners Association. And in 2019, I believe, 2019, the NCA, so the National Confectioners Association, got together with the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, and they did an update to this research. And because the FCIA was involved, there is a greater emphasis on premium chocolate, what the FCA calls fine chocolate. Chances are, if you're watching The Chocolate Life Live, you are interested in fine chocolate. And if you've been following The Chocolate Life as a maker, whether you're a confectioner or a chocolate maker or both, chances are you are interested in the fine chocolate market, right? What we find is that, right, in 2019, right, The reverse is true, right? The insights show that millennials, right, are changing the purchasing patterns for chocolate, right? So 7 years later, it's not older adults, baby boomers, who are driving consumption. Now it's millennials that are driving consumption. And this is 2021, so it's taken, the research was probably done in the early days of the pandemic. We need to understand that, right? But millennials are changing their purchasing patterns for chocolate. They have an above average preference for fine chocolate. That language is there because of the association with FCIA, and the likelihood for purchasing their treats at supercenters, specialty and organic stores, and through alternative channels. So, yay. The millennial shoppers also demonstrate a clear preference for certifications and specification, production, and ingredient claims. So, this tells you that relatively recently, this is 2019, that a huge shift in terms of purchasing patterns had happened, and we get a change of demographics in terms of driving, changing the purchasing patterns, right? Really important, right? There's also, right, important insight here that says the report divides consumers into 3 segments. So there's a mainstream chocolate consumer, a premium chocolate consumer, and a fine chocolate consumer. So what's the difference between premium chocolate consumer and fine chocolate consumer, right? As I understand it, right, the premium chocolate market is denoted only on price. So we have mass market and premium, right? And the difference between mass market chocolate candy and premium chocolate candy, right, is going to be based on price. When I started this, back in, 2000 or so, when I was looking at putting together my initial rating system, the difference between mass market and premium was $15 a pound, right? Retail price. It's gone up since then with inflation, of course, but you get the idea that the difference between mass market chocolate or mainstream chocolate and premium chocolate consumer is primarily based on price. Fine chocolate consumer is somebody who pays attention to the details of flavor, origin, and those kinds of things, right? They're not focused primarily on the price of the product, but they're focused on the organoleptic and other characteristics of the chocolate. And that would be how I would differentiate between premium and fine in this particular context, right? And also that fine chocolate consumers, right, explore a variety of channels to locate smaller artisan chocolatiers and chocolate makers that source high quality cocos. So, right, in 7 years, we've seen quite a shift in terms of how millennials, which is one of the largest largest segments of the market, are thinking about their chocolate consumption happens. Now, what we can do is, this is another report. So here we have the Shelby report. Don't know them. They talk about grocery news and supermarket insights. Here we have an industry report. So Candy and Snack Today, talking about the same research. And I don't, what are we going to learn here? They talk about the 3 different segments. They talk about attitudes and behaviors of chocolate, right? But there is some other interpretation here, right, about the research that was done that is different from the previous report. So we have a little quote from Bill Guyton, who was then the executive director of the FCAA, so that over the past year and a half, this is from, we've seen consumers more willing to treat themselves to a piece of chocolate in order to support their emotional well-being during this stressful period. And looking at the date on this, we find 2021, we're talking specifically about COVID. What's fun about this particular, the 2021 report, is if you go to the NCAA website. Now, I have a link to this page, but I don't have a link to this page. I will put that link to this page in. What we do is we have the ability to download the full report, which actually requires that you be a member of either the National Confectionery Association or the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, which I am not at the moment. I'm not a member of either. But what we can do is we can download the executive summary. And here's the executive summary. And I will put a link to this PDF I don't feel comfortable downloading the PDF and embedding the PDF in today's post, but I will in fact embed the link to this so that you'll be able to download it yourself. Why? It's 2021. It's some of the most recent research. NCA, represents, the National Confectionery Association represents the entire confectionery industry in the United States. The FCIA represents a small portion of this. But let's go down to the bottom of the report. Number one, right? I really love a report where they show you their methodology and give you their definitions, right? So in the context of the numbers that are being presented here, right, what do we know about these? So for this particular report, I will zoom up a little bit to make it easier. What they said is that all of the data were collected during August 2021. There was a national sample of a little over 1,500 consumers. I don't know how those consumers were selected, right? But I do know that they were reached out to. This is not a self-selecting panel who responded to come and fill out a survey, right? So there's an important difference there. Self-selected surveys will give you very, very different results. They surveyed people between the ages of 18 and 75. The margin of error is between 2.5%, is around 2.5% plus minus, at the 95% confidence level, which says that statistically speaking, we can be relatively certain that this is information that we can rely upon. Good to know, right? So we have definitions. What is Gen Z? What is a younger millennial? What is an older millennial? What is Gen X, right? And what are boomers? So, so when you think about how you want to approach who your target market is, my target market is, for example, people who are older millennials to Generation X, right? Because they have higher household incomes or household incomes above a certain amount, right? So I'm focusing on a consumer who likely has more discretionary money to spend. From a psychographic perspective, so that would be a demographic perspective. From a psychographic perspective, I'm interested in someone who has demonstrated a willingness to purchase fine wine as opposed to cheap box wine. I'm somebody who's interested in, has demonstrated a willingness to pay more for gourmet cheese, right, at a cheese store, a specialty cheese store, and not just, processed cheese in a bag at the grocery store. So those would be examples of psychographic tendencies that we would try to put together with the demographics. But we also understand, man, some percentage of this market, I can't imagine only spending $95 a week on groceries. But I live in New York City, and that could be part of it. We talk about the household income for the people who were surveyed and who makes the shopping habits. And then, right, we have how the country was divided into areas. And so if you were to look at the crosstabs, right, in the data, and I don't know that how many of these tables are published. If we looked at the crosstabs, we would be able to say how many people are there, statistically speaking, right? How many people are there, for example, in this Northwest Central area, which includes North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri? How many of them have the higher household income that is who I'm targeting and are in the age range that I'm targeting? So this is where, finding this research is a challenge free, right? That it does exist out there. But if you're not willing to spend, well, at this point, an FCIA membership might not be all that expensive to get your hands on this, right? But certainly NCA membership would be much more expensive, or a market research study would be more expensive to do this. But anyway, they say they have data based on census region, area, ethnicity, household size, children in the household, HHI, store choices, and spending. So that's pretty cool. So again, it may be worth an FCIA membership if you're selling bars and confections to get at this data, right? So this tells us a lot about the way the information was constructed and the way it's presented. But here are the key findings. Here are the key takeaways, right, from the research. So number one, the key finding, and this is in 2021, so innovation drives engagement, right? So it is not, so what it says here is that there is a range of items, right? And innovation in flavor, texture, ingredients, and packaging and branding. So what consumers are looking for is, if you've been producing the same product for the last 10 years and there's not been a whole lot of variation in your product line, a consumer is going to look at you and go, well, you may have been a childhood favorite of mine, or you may have been a family favorite, but as I grow up and I'm expanding my own understanding, that what I want something different. And speaking of different, we're going to take a very, very short break. One of the things that, the new layout editor has given me, need to go to this screen, is I now have a full screen view for me. Now, previous, I only had this view, but now I have this view. Perhaps it's a little scary. And you'll notice I'm moving, so there's no photograph over my left hand, over my left shoulder. But I want to say thank you, everybody, for joining me here today on The Chocolate Life Live. Today, we're talking about the changing demographics of chocolate buyers. And I want to remind people that if you are watching, please go into the comments, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and let me know where in the world you're coming from. I'll get a shout out on screen. And if you have a question about anything that I'm talking about here, please go and ask the question. Be happy to answer that question for you. So, with that, let's go back. So the number one takeaway from this NCA-FCIA research, right, is that innovation drives engagement. So we need to balance that. So the number one thing that you as a chocolate maker or confectioner, whatever product you're making for people, is that you need to realize that you need to have cash cows, right? 80% of your income should come from 20% of your products. You need to have things that people will walk into your store day in and day out, right, and buy on a weekly basis. If all you produce is what I will call a challenging chocolate, it's one that requires, really, really close attention, and it's marketed with you only need to eat a very small amount of it in order to be satisfied. Maybe you reserve that for a very, very small, not maybe, you should, right? Reserve that for a very, very small selection of your bars. When you get really good beans and you can do something really special with it, right? What you want to do is you want to produce the chocolate or product which represents, what it is that your artistic aesthetic influence is. This is my statement, right? As a chocolate maker or a confectioner, right? I want to do that. But for the most part, you want to have things that people will walk in on a regular basis, once a week, twice a month, right? They're going to come in and they're going to buy, and they're not necessarily going to save it for weeks and weeks and weeks to consume over the course of several months. They're going to eat it up and they're going to come back and buy another one. If you do not have a product, right, that can be consumed by a child under the age of 10, you need to consider having products that will be impulse buys, something for $1, $2, right? That if a parent brings a child with them into your shop, right, the child will go, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, I want that. And at $1 or $2, there's not a whole lot of friction associated with making that purpose. So that's understanding. If you never have small children walk into your shop, or people never ask, for child-friendly products, maybe you don't have to worry about it, right? But I would think about how the traffic into your store and how you might attract traffic with kid-friendly products, right? If you don't have something that's got salted caramel in it, it's the number one flavor in the world. Salted caramel. You need to have something with salted caramel in your product line. I don't know. I don't care how you do it. You need to have something with salted caramel because people expect it. But so 80% of your stuff 80% of your income should come from 20% of your product. You can do seasonal swap outs, right? So, 4 times a year, you introduce a new flavor. And what you want to do is you want to be careful to pay attention to which flavors are the ones that sell year round, right? And those are the ones you want to make sure are available year round, right? If something is very, very popular as a seasonal flavor, right, what you can do is you can say, well, the way I would handle that is from a psychographics perspective, is I would say, well, it's only going to be available this season, right? And we're only going to make a limited amount of it. But if what you want to do is you want to be on a mailing list so you can be the first person to know when this product is reintroduced, then you have an opportunity to engage with the customer and be given their permission to reach out to them, right, on a regular basis. Right? So understanding the how innovation and flavor drives engagement with your customers, right? It's the engagement part of it. How do you actively engage with your customers around innovation? It's not just innovating for the sake of innovation. Number one, innovation needs to be meaningful, right? Innovation is not going from a regular Three Musketeers bar to a mint Three Musketeers bar, even though the company may think of it as innovation. It's not really innovation in my mind. But if you are going to play around with fun flavors, then engaging with your customers around what how they react to them, and then being able to use that engagement to be able to drive interest in the introduction of these products, for example, on a seasonal basis. So if it turns out that a pumpkin pie spice product is like the number one seller, then it's probably not a year-round flavor. But if somebody really, really likes the product, right, then finding a way to agree to have them give you their email address so that you can inform them when these new flavors are available is a good way to use innovation to drive engagement. And that's, I think, the point that is being made. All right. So variety is the spice of life. That makes enormous sense. But more than 80% of consumers partake in at least 2 of the 3 chocolate segments. So if I'm a mass market consumer, sometimes I'll go up to the premium segment. If I'm a premium segment, then I will go into the fine chocolate segment. Chances are that a fine chocolate consumer going to the mainstream chocolate less often, except maybe around Halloween. Right? That would be a good place. Hey, I'm buying Halloween candy. I'm buying Easter candy. We can see it as a holiday kind of thing. Maybe I'm buying as a gift for somebody I know likes a particular product. All right. Right. So just important thing to know there is that there is overlap. When I was writing for Chocolatier magazine, I was doing a newsletter insert. I would be talking to Michelin-starred chefs and very, very high-end chocolatiers. And one of the questions I would ask everybody is, what's your secret of chocolate obsession? Right? You're working with some of the best chocolate in the world, but when you're off the clock and you're just at home on the weekend, what do you eat? And French chefs say they like Snickers bars. So there's not an exclusivity there, right? There is crossover. And so, but what that says is you can go to the mainstream chocolate market and the premium chocolate market for ideas for innovating flavors, even if you are in quote unquote a fine chocolate segment. So how do you provide crossover products, right, which will bring people into your market? So why do I say that? We think of, for example, somebody like Jacques Therese. So Jacques, made his reputation as the pastry chef at Le Cirque and was one of the initial chefs that upon which the reputation of the Food Network is based, right? But if you go to the Jacques Therese retail locations, and I've spoken with Jacques about this, his number one selling products are like chocolate-covered popcorn and chocolate-covered Cheerios and things like that. I mean, they're products that bring people in, right? And they're looking around and they will buy things which are more in the fine chocolate market, whereas they come in for something that might be considered a mainstream or premium chocolate product, right? So just because you might think of yourself as a fine chocolate maker does not mean that there will be a great attraction for producing more attractively priced products that will bring people into your store. And then you have an opportunity to upsell them, which is part of this, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So absolutely, if you can understand about the buying preferences for a mainstream consumer, you can understand how you can use that insight into developing a product mix that will attract a wider range of customers. So I think this is something that we in the world of chocolate know, which is that an educated consumer, one who knows more about chocolate, all right, will have greater appreciation. But what that will do is that understanding may get people over the hump of spending a lot more. So if I walk into let's just say I walk into a gourmet specialty store and I'm presented with this shelf, and I have 100-gram bars for $2.99 over here and 100-gram bars for $5.99 or $9.99, right? Just shelved right next to each other. The average consumer who is not really educated about why chocolate could cost $10 a bar is going to be very, very difficult to get them over the hump, and they're going to most times decide to go with something that is familiar and comfortable and that they know, right? So finding a retail situation where there is somebody who can guide the buyer through the process. So here in New York, where I am, probably one of the best examples of that is a store called The Meadow, right? Which also sells salts and bitters, and I think it also started off when it opened selling flowers. But so you're going in there for an experience and to be educated about what's on the shelves, whether it is salt or whether it is chocolate. So finding a way to engage your customer in very, very short, to the point, simple to understand conversations about what makes what you're doing special or different is going to be really important to you. And it's also important to understand that, like many things, it may not make a difference the first time around. It may be that, third or fourth or the fifth time that they come into the shop, right? And I would say that sampling is an important part of this. For example, I know that when I was at Letterpress visiting David and Corey Menkes, this is, 2008, 17, 18, it was a long time ago, that you walk in and they have their bars laid out, but there are samples of each chocolate, and so people could taste the difference between their Ghana bar and their Ghana with sea salt and Ucayali Peru. And when they were doing that, somebody was there at the counter giving them short little explanations of the differences. And so this repeated exposure to this information will will make the customer over time more comfortable with the idea of spending more for the chocolate. And listen, I mean, the Ucayali River Bar from Letterpress is almost all. I mean, it's a very, very technically very well made chocolate. It's very flavorful, but it's challenging for a lot of people as a first introduction. So having a Ghana bar, which is a very, very familiar flavor profile, right? So even if the customer comes in and what they do is they buy the Ghana bar, they've become your customer, and they're going to come back for the Ghana bar, and the next time they may be, I'm willing to try that, right? So education drives experimentation, and that's not it's also true of you. The more you know about flavor, the more you can do about experimentation and innovation that will drive engagement. But here, education drives experimentation, and that is in terms of experimentation, what the consumer is willing to buy to get them out of their comfort zone and to try something new, right? And understanding may not work the first time. It may require multiple exposures to get somebody up the hill, but it's really, really important that you provide the sort of comparative experience so that people can experiment, and that you provide them with information about why things are different. Don't beat them over the head. No long-winded explanations, just really short, concise ideas about what to say. Another thing that is very interesting in the research, and we'll see that other place, is that it used to be that the average consumer just overwhelmingly thought that European chocolate was better than American-made chocolate. And that is something that has changed in the last 10 years. Really, really important to understand that there are a large percentage of consumers who now believe that American-made chocolate is on a par and or better than European-made brands. And that's a complete shift in understanding over the course of the last 20 years. So 6 in 10 customers, this environmental stewardship. So 6 in 10 customers care about how their food is made, what's in it, where it comes from. So using Gen Z, and millennials, right? The importance of social environmental stewardship in chocolate production and packaging is going to be a long-term trend. And so one way to make sure that you are going to go and attract new customers is to make sure that you are on top of this particular messaging, especially amongst Gen Z and millennials. And if we come down here, we look and say Gen Z and millennials are people between the ages of 25 and 56. I mean, that's an enormous swath of the population, right? And so understanding what that 21 to 56 age group is looking for, and how much money they have to spend, is going to give you a really good understanding of where you should position your business. The other thing it says is that you got to be online selling your product, which is a no-brainer. We all know that, especially coming out the other side of COVID, is that, I mean, e-commerce saved a lot of craft chocolate makers during COVID. People who were relying on distribution and in-store distribution were going to farmer markets, which were no longer happening, had to make the shift online. And this is one of the things that I took away from the pandemic, is that even though some companies went out of business, a lot fewer companies than I expected went out of business, because they were able to make the transition to robust online sales and just change the way they marketed the company and the way they reached out to their customers to create loyal customers. I think it's really, really phenomenal. Really, really a good thing, I think. Well, I know, because these businesses are around today. So thinking about, right, how you can use e-commerce, for example, to drive engagement. Is there innovation in e-commerce that you can drive engagement? There is one innovation, right? I don't know that it's necessarily an innovation to anybody, but it turns out that loyalty and rewards programs, right, are one of the best ways to drive engagement. It's a question of how you go and implement them, but engagement and changing the way. So innovation in the way you engage with people. So it's not just in terms of flavors and not just in terms of formats, right? It is innovation in the way you communicate with your customers to drive engagement is also really important. So, for example, I remember, for example, speaking with Sarah Hart, who founded Alma Chocolate in Portland. Alma, I mean, she sold the business a number of years ago to Moonstruck. But one of the things that Sarah said that she did is that she used all of her seconds as free samples, right? Which is, when she started selling ice cream, she would rework her seconds into the ice cream as inclusions, right? So I thought that was a really, really interesting way to change the way she engages with her customers. So rather than thinking the seconds as a loss, right? Sometimes she would sell boxes of seconds at lower prices. I mean, again, play with the way you merchandise your product, the way you talk to your consumers in order to drive engagement with them, I think is the important takeaway here. Not just you need to change up flavors in order to be able to drive engagement. Now, this is a magazine called Convenience Store. And this is something that you need to be careful about, is that this article is actually just a rehash of this article, right? So they're talking about the same research. So this comes from Candy and Snack Today. It's about the National Confectioners Association Sweet Insights reports. This research from Convenience Store is talking about the same research, right? Right. So that doesn't mean it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? What we need to do is we need to look closely at it. So for number one is, it's got the same set of 7 takeaways, right? That's the way we know that they're talking about the same report. But there may be other information in here, right, that you can use, right? And so just be aware of the fact that we have two different research reports that are talking about the same thing. Don't immediately dismiss it, but look through it and find out if there's anything new that you can find out about the report, because different outlets will report on different parts of the report. And it turns out this one focuses on, so the wave of interest in fine chocolate, quote, has spurred all sorts of new experimentation and inclusions, right? So one of the things that seems to be an indication is that, right, and this is backed up by other research. I hope I've highlighted it and we can get there. But it turns out that only 3% of consumers, I remember the number because it just jumped out at me, I hope I can find it, but only 3% of consumers prefer plain chocolate bars, right? 97% of consumers prefer chocolate bars that have some sort of inclusion or flavoring in them. So if you're a purist and all you make is 2-ingredient craft chocolate bars, single origin, nothing but beans and sugar, and you do not make bars that have inclusions in them, right, you're making your job trying to be profitable a lot harder for you, right? So thinking about inclusions, thinking about local inclusions, thinking about how you're going to add flavors and textures to your product, right? Still using the same chocolate, maybe slightly different recipes, still using the same beans, right? Recognizing that 90% of consumers, right, are looking for products with inclusions in them. So here is another trade magazine. Excuse me, let me get rid of that. It's another trade magazine. They're talking about chocolate consumption is on the rise. Good thing, right? So we're talking about June of 2021. So we know it's still pandemic, but right. So we find that here are some specifics. Sales of premium chocolate in the grocery channel was up more than 20%. The entire chocolate segment only saw an 18% increase. So, okay. So grocery channels for premium showed a greater increase in sales than other kinds of chocolate, right? So good to know if you're trying to convince a buyer in a grocery environment to pick up your product, you can say that, hey, recently the growth has been in the premium chocolate segment, which fine chocolate is a part. So 3 in 4 respondents said the primary reason for indulging in daily chocolate was to reward themselves, right? Again, taking a look at Cargill research. So we need to be aware of that. But in this particular place, this particular report on this research, this was, I think, the number one takeaway for a craft chocolate maker when it comes to research talking about the psychographics of consumers. Consumers perceive products highlighting cocoa bean origin to be of higher quality. Now, that may or may not be true. It may not actually be of higher quality, right? That's, we need to be very aware of that. But most consumers perceive that if you have the name of the country visible on the front of the bar, right, that there is the perception that this chocolate is of higher quality than a chocolate. Oh, let me see if I can zoom up there. Right. So really important to know. Right. So, this research, the most sought claim across all categories was made with real chocolate, right? People may know of a book by Michael Pollan called Food Rules, right? And one of the rules is don't buy anything that has an ingredient in it that your grandmother wouldn't have used in something that she cooked, right? And then he asked people to submit rules, and I submitted a rule, which is don't buy anything which has marketed the phrase "made with real anything." So made with real fruit. It's like, okay. Just that's a marketing claim which is designed to obfuscate something, right? So good to know, but people are looking for claims around being pure, although I wouldn't use the word real in this particular case, but something that implies that there's nothing unnatural, nothing artificial in being what's going on, which is that important thing. 45% of consumers said they were looking for new types of chocolate products, right? Classic flavor pairings went out. 60% of respondents chose caramel and peanut butter as one of the top 3 chocolate flavor pairings. So if you don't have a chocolate and nuts, again, unless you're in a nut-free facility, in which case you can roast sesame seed or sunflower seeds to be a very, very close equivalent. But caramel, salted caramel, and peanut butter, right, are things you want to pay attention to, right? Now, interesting, right? So this is one. What's the most popular type of chocolate among the C-store, convenience store decisions? You'll find interesting stuff many, many places. Again, convenience store means mainstream chocolate. There may be like one premium brand, right? Depending on where you're going. Again, they're talking about the same research: peanuts, peanut butter, caramel and toffee, mint and coconut tie for 4th, but only 3% of consumers, this is where I got this number, only 3% of consumers say that they prefer no inclusions in their chocolate. Now, this needs to be moderated against the fact that this is in convenience stores, and they're talking about mass market and maybe some premium chocolate, not necessarily fine chocolate, right? So this does need to be moderated, but it does say, man, there's a heavy amount of interest in chocolate that has stuff in it. And if I take a look at, for example, the International Chocolate Awards and the Academy of Chocolate Awards, there is a growing interest, right? People are doing a lot more work. Craft chocolate makers are doing a lot more work around really, really interesting flavors in their chocolate bars. And I find personally that that's what I react to the most strongly. As a judge, you know, if I've got a flight of 70% chocolates, all from beans from Peru, it's like I want to pull my hair out halfway through it, because it's really difficult for me to be able to identify meaningful nuances, meaningful differences in those chocolates. But if I've got something which has got inclusions in it, it's more of my senses are engaged in more interesting ways, and I just prefer that, right? On something else that's interesting here, it says that among consumers who mostly purchase mainstream and premium chocolates, manufacturer brands, right, are preferred over store brands. So I walk in and I see, for example, I see a CVS branded chocolate bar right next to a Hershey branded chocolate bar. I'm more likely to buy Hershey or Lindt or Ghirardelli or something like that than I am the CVS bar. Manufacturers also represent the vast majority of sale, 98% of chocolate dollars, which says that if you're an independent chocolate maker and you're up against a sale where I'm in a grocery store, for example, let's not grocery store, I'm in Whole Foods, 98%, all right, of those products are going to be, 98% of sales are going to go to non-house brands. So it's an important thing to understand when you're pitching into a retail environment, right? And this is where, between American-made chocolate and European-made chocolate, nearly half said there was no difference between the two. Almost a third said Europe is better, and about a quarter said they prefer American-made. And that's a monumental shift in terms of public sentiment on this. So last thing I'm going to talk about right now, because we're almost at the end of the hour, is, and there's a link to this on the page. There's a link to this Public Library of Science, PLOS. It's right here, Understanding American Premium Chocolate Consumer. So, so this was done out of Penn State University. So it's an academic study, and I don't think that the size of the universe was. I don't remember they're talking about, you know, the plus or minus and the percentage of confidence level for what they're doing, right? And it is the only bit of research that's been done that I can find at any point. This was done in 2020. The research was completed, or at least the survey was completed before the pandemic, I believe, and then it took some time to research it. But this is an understanding of the premium chocolate consumer and how they perceive craft chocolate, right? And desirable product attributes. So really, really important. If you're selling a craft chocolate product and you want to understand how a premium chocolate buyer looks at craft chocolate, This is the only bit of research that exists which gives you an insight into what these people are looking at. I'm not going to go into it again in any depth here, but they do talk about the methodology, they talk about the results, the conclusion, and all sorts of stuff. So it's I think one of the more important. It's not perfect, but I think, as I say, it is the only bit of research which specifically talks about craft chocolate perception among premium chocolate consumers. And I can't recommend it more highly for anybody who's looking for research that they can incorporate into a business planning document for their own purposes, right? A business planning document for investor purposes. I mean, this is specifically aimed at craft chocolate producers, which is one of the reasons why we like it. And with that, I want to say that, again, to remind everybody, this is the post for today's The Chocolate Life Live. You can go there. There are links to most of the resources. I will put the rest of the links into the post this afternoon. And while you're there, if you're not already a member, what you can do is I'm logged in, so I've got a count here, but if you're not logged in, it'll say join. You can join the Chocolate Life. Free membership. There's always a free membership. If you've got the resources and you want to help me on a regular basis, you can do a recurring membership monthly or annually. And I appreciate all of that support, of course. But one of the things that becoming a member enables you to do is that at the bottom of every post, there's a comments page. And so you can go, and if you've got something that you don't want to put in the comments at YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, if you're a member, you can go and put those comments on the page of the post itself. I read every single comment and respond to them. So go ahead, please do that and do it. If you are watching and you don't feel like you want to make a recurring contribution, there's now a tip jar or what we call the Hot Chocolate Fund. So if you just want to make a small donation, non-recurring, no commitment, you can go and click on this button on the page right now. I have got a couple of recent reviews, so one of which is Milk Boy. If you're a classic Swiss chocolate lover, then this is a brand that will meet your expectations. And if you're looking for something which is different from what it is that you're getting from, as I described, one of the Big Boy Pants brands. If you want to read it, it is a members only post. I just want to let you know that. This particular interesting one, Alpine milk with lemon and ginger, is a real interesting combination. Lemon and ginger with milk chocolate. It's an interesting combination. It's pretty well done. Nice texture. Really nice bright aromas from that place. If you have a dietary requirement and you want to do low sugar, then there's this review here from Ross Chocolates in Canada. So these are things which are available right now on The Chocolate Life. And with that, it's Friday. I am moving. Moving day is this coming Sunday. I'm going to be out of my apartment office here in Brooklyn on Sunday. And that starts the beginning of the cross-country craft chocolate odyssey. The Chocolate Life live streams are going to be perhaps intermittent. I don't know that I'm going to be able to schedule every day because I don't know when it is that I'm going to be traveling, or I do know when it is that I'm going to be traveling, and I'll try to schedule around them. But over the course of the next couple of weeks, there'll be less emphasis on the Chocolate Life Live and more emphasis on posts from places that I'm visiting. I've got Good Now Farms in Sudbury, Massachusetts, Maverick Chocolate in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm going to be visiting Mike at Encore Coffee Company in Kansas City, as well as Christopher Elbow. Going to be visiting some people in Santa Fe. In Denver, I'm hoping to have just visiting a whole bunch of people. Mark and Yuri at Blue Spruce Chocolates are going to host some things that I'm going to be a part of. And so, and then I'm going to make my way to Arizona, where I will pick up these Chocolate Life live streams on a regular basis again from sometime in mid-April. But with that, thanks for staying through to the end. For those of you who did, I appreciate the show of support. If you can, like, subscribe, share, grow the channel. Always appreciated. But with that, I want to remind everybody that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you just might be doing it wrong.